power-packed debate this evening. We've got Nalin Kohli of the BJP, Sanjay Jha of the Congress, Jay Panda of the Biju Janata Dal, Atul Anjan of CPI, and Yogendra Yadav, founder and national president of Swaraj India political party. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us here on ET Now. We'll try and get the line back with Sanjay Jha. The big question that we're asking this evening: why is the opposition boycotting this historic session of the parliament? Ideally, the first question should have gone to Nalin, but I'm not going to ask Nalin the first question. It should go to the opposition. Atul Anjan, why the boycott of this historic session of parliament? I mean, you know, this is a reform that multiple governments, multiple political parties have worked on. Why was the need to boycott this session? Atul Anjan, that question is for you.
It's a so language question, but anyway, I am answering it. But the question is, the finance minister, Mr. Arun Jaitley, said, if the opposition is boycotting, what is the matter of concern? Because it's a very good thing, and we are not worried about the opposition, whether they are boycotting it or they are staying away. It makes no difference. When the finance minister himself is so confident that if the opposition doesn't know, because they are having an extravaganza show, and they think this is the biggest event after the 1947. So they think that, all right, मैं एक बात कहना चाहता हूं कि बंद गले का काला कोट पहन लेने से हर कोई आदमी डॉक्टर अंबेडकर नहीं हो जाता और चूड़ीदार पजामा पहन लेने से हर कोई जवाहरलाल नेहरू नहीं हो जाता. You are putting the Jawaharlal Nehru's 1947 15th August speech and putting your speech together. What message you want to give? I just want to ask one question. Why you have taken in on contract the celebrities and investing money of the taxpayer just to tell what is the what a wonderful idea GST is this? If your idea is so beautiful, why you are engaging Amitabh Bachchan? Why you are engaging celebrities? Why you are misusing the people's money with taxpayers' money just to promote yourself? People will judge your this system from biscuit to कफन, बिस्कुट से लेकर कफन तक आपने जीएसटी लगा दिया. कौन इसका जिम्मेदार है? कौन इसका जवाब देगा? बताइए ना. इस देश के अंदर आप सारा पैसा लेकर के you will collect the tax and then you will give tax concession to the corporate houses. For this you are bringing GST. You have to answer all these questions.
Atul ji, right. Atul ji, the trouble with this boycott is that state governments, whether it was the Samajwadi Party earlier or whether it's the Congress Party and various governments of the Congress Party across the country, have been party to this decision. The GST State Council is privy to decisions that have been made by the state finance ministers along with the central government. And so, Sanjay Jha, the question is really, why are you not present at Parliament today? What are you opposing? Are you milking the discontent on the ground because you are a party to this decision earlier?
Supriya, let me answer you with a very calm demeanor, because I don't think this subject demands all of us to get into a stage of turbulence. It's very straightforward. The Congress Party is the party, along with the UPA members, that created the architecture of the GST. The world knows that if Mr. Narendra Modi and Mr. Shivraj Chauhan and a couple of BJP state governments had not opposed it purely for political reasons, this bill would have been a reality during UPA itself. Now, why would we object to a bill that we have created overall in terms of ensuring that the tax system becomes efficient? We are objecting to the manner in which this whole glitter and glamour, the gloss and razzmatazz is being created by Mr. Modi by holding a midnight event. It's not a session of parliament, it's an event. And how can Mr. Modi at this point, and you know, when firstly the operational integrity of the GST is itself not ready, the software is not yet prepared. A couple of hours ago, the GST Council has decided, just a few minutes ago actually, Mr. Jaitley says that they have taken a decision to reduce the GST on fertilizer. You're working in an ad hoc manner simply because this is a headline grabbing government. And I think, Supriya, you are aware of it. I mean, did the Congress UPA do such a session for Manrega, for RTI, which is a landmark act on transparency? Did we do it for food security? Did we do it for FDI and multi-brand retail? In the parliamentary history of India, it has never happened. Now, we agree that this is a very significant landmark tax reform. But for Mr. Modi and the BJP to try and tom-tom this and make it into some kind of a, publicity, PR and propaganda event is downright shameful. Because the history of Parliament has shown that you do these midnight sessions. It happened with the famous Pandit Nehru's speech of Tryst with Destiny, and we have celebrated 25 and 50 years of parliamentary, the freedom of India in Parliament. Now, they are making a complete mockery of it. As Mr. Anand Sharma rightly stated, it is virtually insulting the entire independent movement of India, the freedom movement of India. I mean, this is absolutely, in my opinion, a very pedestrian act by the BJP government.
Sanjay, okay, that's your view, and you could have also done a midnight event on Manrega or on RTI. You chose not to. This is the BJP's way of functioning. They want to do a gala. They had invited you over. You are boycotting this for reasons beyond my comprehension. You have been party to this decision. Are you boycotting because this is happening at midnight and you would have attended if this was happening in the day? I mean, I really fail to understand that. I will discuss that in a lot more in just a bit. But I want to take this question also to Yogendra Yadav, because then I'm going to get two people who are on board with what's happening, and that's Jay Panda and Nalin Kohli. But Yogendra Yadav, this is a moment. You may hate it, you may think we are underprepared, but this is momentous. This is very, very eventful. India's taxation is going to undergo a sea change. Opposition boycotting the launch, isn't that unfortunate, politically speaking?
It is indeed unfortunate for something which was built through political consensus, which had come up after a long time, to actually have this moment just at the moment of inauguration. The real question is, who is responsible for such an unfortunate event? I personally thought that the BJP, by playing the way in which it did, by not acknowledging the fact that actually it was the BJP that has delayed the implementation of GST by something like 4 years, by not acknowledging the fact that at least in this one instance, Congress actually played a big role. Congress could have played exactly the role that BJP played, and that would have stalled it by another at least couple of years. Congress did not. So the Prime Minister, if the Prime Minister had acknowledged that role, if the Prime Minister had presented this move to the country as a cross-party move, as a move which is not his own party's own little birthday party, then it would have registered as such. So I personally think the manner in which the Prime Minister has converted this entire thing into a personal show and into his party's own projection is responsible for such an unfortunate moment.
Have to confess, it's a bit perplexing that the opposition is not to the manner of implementation in terms of the fact that we have multiplicity of rates, the fact that will anti-profiteering clause sort of backfire, the fact that is GST being introduced in haste, but the whole sort of tamasha or the fact that it's been turned into an event, is that a big enough reason to have opposed it in the manner that it is being done? Jay Panda, because at the end of the day, the opposition is not on substantive issues, clearly, as you've heard all the speakers so far.
Well, the Biju Janata Dal, as you know, has supported the GST, and we pushed through certain amendments and not everything. We are attending. I would like to say this. I think we have a tendency in this country to criticize the good because it is not perfect. And yes, this GST is not perfect, because if I had my way, I would rather that we did not have multiple documentation and did not have separate GST for state and the union government. But to say that it is not good is a terrible disservice to the country, because not only is it the single most important fiscal and taxation reform in the last 7 decades, it for the first time makes our country one market. We have been hobbling ourselves by treating ourselves as 36, 37 different markets instead of one large market. And this makes a huge difference. So I think we should see the good in it, which is very, very substantial. I agree with some of the critiques of it, which I think the opportunities will be there to rectify this in the coming years.
Okay, Nalin Kohli, finally you get your turn. You've patiently heard everyone there, and we've got representation from across the political spectrum. The charge is, why have you turned this into an event? The comparison with the historic speech of Jawaharlal Nehru. Why did this need to be turned into an event? Could this not have been done in a slightly more sober manner? That's the charge from opposition.
This is going to take time because I have a few points of my own and I need to respond to a lot that's been said. But I'll start with the last point, that the Prime Minister has not thanked the opposition. And Yogendra Ji, whom I respect for doing his homework, this time has miserably failed to do so. And I will read out what the Prime Minister said in the Lok Sabha on the 8th of August in 2016 after GST was passed by both houses. Only 5-6 sentences. Trust is an essential element in the federal structure, says PM Modi in the Lok Sabha. I held consultations with Sonia Ji and Manmohan Singh Ji. We made efforts to take into consideration everyone's suggestions. Rashtra Niti is bigger than Rajniti. We want to thank all parties, state governments. We are taking a decision which the Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha states have brought about in detail. Then he says, this can't be seen as a victory of a party or a government. It is a win for the democratic ethos of India and a victory for everyone. GST means great step by Team India. GST means great step towards transparency. He thanked them on the floor of the House. Number two, it pained me to hear that this is an event, that is the Parliament of India, the temple of democracy. It's not a banquet hall that someone can hire to do an event, like a marriage or a show or something like that. Number three, GST, why it was held up. Mr. Jaitley is on the record, and Mr. Jaitley also, less than 21 hours ago, appealed. He continues to say that our appeal is there. So I'm starting here, now my points, that we thank the opposition for everything that they've done to make such a historic thing possible. This is not a BJP, it's a consensus thing done by all states, including Congress ruled, including left ruled. Why they are opposing, that is for them to decide. The next point is that GST, why it was delayed. There were 3 or 4 issues. States were concerned about indirect taxes going from them and whether the center would compensate them. Even today, petroleum, even today, alcohol, and a few things are kept out of the ambit. As Mr. Jaitley said, that ultimately, whether we have 100% GST on day one, or if we can start with 90 and reach 100, which is preferable? If we can start with 90 and reach 100, in the face of not getting 100 on day one, is obviously a better choice. This consultation process has brought it to where it is. It may not be perfect, everything is never perfect, but it's certainly a great step in the right direction. And instead of celebrating it, what are we getting in return? What we are getting in return is it's a great event. What is the problem? I'm unable to understand. It's political schizophrenia or political bipolarity. On one end, you've got all the states, including Congress states, left states, supporting, coming up with the rates through consensus. On the other hand, they are boycotting the launch of it, where there'll be the president, the vice president, the prime minister, the speaker, other dignitaries. And if people come on an ad, if personalities of India are pointing out, speaking on GST, is that a crime? Are they Indian citizens? They can't? Where are we taking this debate? The opposition wants to boycott, do it. But can they come up with a cogent reason? On one hand, they say we are not against GST, then they say it's a tamasha. I am unable to understand. Since when is Parliament a tamasha? This is not a rally of the BJP where for hearing Prime Minister Modi, 2 to 5 lakh people do come. I think this is just about trying to make a point when none exists.
Sanjay Jha, I want you to come in directly and counter some of the points that Nalin Kohli has raised. He believes that you have been a part of the GST, you've been privy to decision making. Why are you now calling it a tamasha? This is the temple of democracy. This is happening in Parliament. This is not a BJP rally. Is the point he's making? What's your counter to that?
Firstly, I don't think Mr. Kohli has done his homework well. We are not part of the GST. We created the GST. The BJP obstructed it, has only made political capital because they won in 2014 with a majority. That's the first correction that I wish to make. The second point, he keeps on and on talking about the fact that the states where Congress was in government supported it. I mean, he again misleads your viewers. The truth is that if states did not sign up for the GST Council's recommendations, as per now that the GST will become law, the states would actually get hugely taxed. They would not be able to get their input tax credits and they would be denied compensation. So end of day, states really did not have any choice. It was a non-negotiable argument. The third point, very critical, and let's not deny this. This is a country which is still grappling some very serious issues. I think he should be aware that the farmers in India are up in revolt. India, agrarian India, rural India is under severe distress. Farmer suicides are on the rise. These are not just alarming rhetoric. These are facts on the ground. You have today a situation where there is social anarchy on account of what their famous cow vigilantes are up to. Joblessness is on the rise. I mean, somebody will ask a fundamental question. I think Atul Anjanji was raising this point, that, you know, there is a moment in the time to make any kind of an occasion into some kind of a, what I call as a glitter and gloss marketing spectacle. Now, we are all, you know, modern thinking people on the panel. We all believe that, yes, you do need an outreach, you need to communicate. But I think the BJP has got a track record of actually trying to just create so much of a hype and hoopla when it lacks both substance as well as style. I mean, end of day, you have a situation today, and I have followed the GST very closely myself, that there are, check out the realities. It's not just the fact that this government has decided to reduce the, you know, GST on fertilizer 1 hour, couple of hours before the launch of GST. It'll ask the small traders and the people in the rural interiors of India who don't have the hardware, are not aware about how to use the software. I mean, these are very, very critical questions. I mean, you know, end of day, the suggestion that we had given was that please cut out this whole, you know, what we call as a grand tamasha, grand spectacle tamasha, the GST full form.
Right.
What we are saying is, you know, there's a moment to be conservative. You know, 1 year down the line, you have a track record, you can go and, you know, celebrate an anniversary and say, hey, well done. But, you know, to be in this headline grabbing obsession, I think, in my opinion, honestly, and my party's opinion, and I back it to the T, is extremely, I think, in poor show.
So, I mean, what I'm gathering from you is that you're actually opposed to the glitter and gloss, in your own words, to how GST is being rolled out, not opposed to the GST per se. I can't seem to make up my mind to what the opposition from the Congress party is, because, you know, your former finance minister has said that GST launch is a good thing, even though in its present imperfect form.
I've been very categorical.
Sanjay, I understand. Sanjay, let me get in Atul and Jan here. And Atulji, you started off by saying that from biscuits to clothing has all been made expensive. What is your opposition to? I mean, you know, the point that Nalin Kohli is making, this is an event that's happening in Parliament. Ideally, you would have wanted all political parties on board to support it, because this is going to change how taxation is done in this country.
You see, my dear friend, Nalin Kohli has said that people between 2 to 5 lakh is coming to listen, Mr. Prime Minister. Very good. When you will speak about the lynching of the people, even 10 lakh people will come. I have no objection on that. I agree with that one. You, after 20 people have lynched, then you speak something. I just want to tell one thing. This demonetization issue. No, demonetization issue, what he said, ये भारत बहनों और भाइयों 50 दिन मुझको दे दीजिए और उसके बाद किसी चौराहे पर हमसे
to Bastar, sir, I can tell you, more people in this world have died out of left-front violence, glorified as nationalism and Maoism, sir. So let's come back to a good debate. Let's come back on GST, sir. We'll discuss the other issues on another. Let's not run down the debate on GST.
Out of the jobs, the economy is in a shatter. There is no place for the, you see, middle and
that's why your governments are losing everywhere.
Our GDP has gone
and you don't
down.
Get elected anyway,
our manufacturing sector
because people who get out of
done
jobs,
very
they elect the
bad.
BJP.
Our exports are very much, you see, affected by this. And I tell you, with GST, collecting this money highest,
that's why the BJP is winning elections, because everything is in a disaster.
People. You know, at one bag of urea, 140 rupees will be as a GST. In one bag of dye, 236 rupees will be added into that one packet of the dye fertilizer. This way, 18% on the tractor parts, for the sprinkler, you are taking 22%, you see. All things, you see, input cost of agriculture will go every day.
I get that point, Mr. Anjan, but these decisions have not been taken by the government in isolation. The rates of every product and service has been decided by council, by the GST council, which had representation of all political parties, from the Congress to the BJP to the BJD to every regional party, including the Aam Aadmi Party. Mr. Anjan, I take your point.
Houses, the Eshsars, the Ambanis, they can squeeze the people through petroleum products, and so GST has been left out, and there is some solace for the state government. I don't understand which sort of economy, which sort of economic management you are doing it.
Mr. Anjan,
Reserve Bank has said it very categorically.
Or I am going, Mr. Anjan, I am going to interrupt you. I am going to interrupt you because I don't want this focus to shift away from GST and this conversation to move into Ambani and Tata and all of that. I am going to interrupt you, Mr. Anjan. Jay Panda, let me come to you. Let's talk about some more substantive issues. Let's talk about some more substantive issues. Jay Panda, do you believe that the rollout of GST has happened in haste? Is it a rushed rollout? The fact that, you spoke about the fact that it's not a perfect GST, the fact there are multiple, sort of taxes, multiple slabs even now. Do you believe that that's a key concern as we welcome GST come midnight? Do you believe it's been a rushed rollout?
I want to make 4 quick points. Now, this is a topic that has been debated in this country for nearly 2 decades. And if after that some people still say that it is rushed, then I don't really know how to respond to that. This was finally supposed to be rolled out last year, April, and has been further delayed by 5 more quarters so that everybody's input could be accommodated. And you can see the result of that compromise. Quick points. This whole debate about who delayed it and who passed it, I think is an irrelevant point, because we know we have a culture in this country of the main political parties flip-flopping their position depending on whether they are in opposition or on government. So I think let's put that behind us and accept the fact that it has finally been passed. And here I do have to come in on the side of Nalin Kohli, because of all your guests, I was the only one who was in the Lok Sabha when GST was passed. And indeed, the Prime Minister was fulsome in his praise of the opposition, including the Congress and my party and many other parties. This whole thing about having a midnight session, of course it is symbolism, but I think that must be considered. It is the single most important tax reform in 7 decades. Let me give you one example of how this is crucial. Some of the nitpicking that is going on points out that other major economies like the US don't have a GST. But you know what they do have? The single biggest aspect of our GST is that it regulates at a national level interstate commerce. And this is something we have lacked for 7 decades. Every state was making its own rules, and that's why trucks take 3 weeks to cross the country instead of 3 days. The US back in 1887 incorporated the Interstate Commerce Act, which provides that no state can come in the way of national commerce, and that it was transformative. It propelled the US into becoming the largest economy and the industrial powerhouse. So I think all of this means that it is not done in haste. Enough debate has gone into it. I still think there will be glitches. It will be foolhardy to say that such a major reform will go completely smoothly. But the government has expressed that it has made preparations and is confident. As long as they are alert, as long as they respond quickly to glitches, I think we should be happy that this has happened.
Right. Nalin Kohli, before I come to you, I want to get a quick word from Sanjay Jha. A lot of this talk has also happened on the fact that the rollout has been rushed. But like Jay Panda pointed out, 15 years in the making. I mean, we'll never get a perfect GST. This is a democracy. You have to balance interests of various political parties, which is what the GST Council has successfully managed to do, which is why you have these multiple slabs. It's not a perfect GST, but an imperfect GST is better than no GST. Sanjay Jha.
Well, let me tell you, I think that applies to any law in any part of the world. I mean, no law is optimal, which is why there are constitutional amendments happening all the time. I mean, that's not the point of discussion here. I think the issues here are critical. I'm glad you're asking a GST-related question. End of day, please don't deny it that if you compare India's GST with similar, kind of tax laws in other countries with, say, Japan or China, or for that matter, Australia and bigger economies, you'll find the GST rate is considerably higher. And, as something that I think Atul Anjan ji was pointing out, don't forget that roughly 45% of your revenue base is not even covered by the GST, which is your, real estate and petroleum, alcohol and electricity, etc. And the third point, I mean, issues like, the anti-profiteering that I think somebody was mentioning earlier. I mean, there are many nebulous issues there in terms of how will you enforce it. One of the biggest fears we have is that GST, which is being, introduced in extraordinary haste, in our opinion, will result in the rise of a, an Inspector Raj. I mean, exactly the contrary to what is the spirit of a transparent law, which is going to be totally online. So you can create multiple problems if you actually, kind of do anything because you're in a great hurry for whatever reason to establish that the GST is on because you made perhaps some prior commitment. Somebody said, well, you'll never get a perfect law. I agree with that. But I also believe that a bad start can actually get a job terribly undone over a considerable period. It might increase the cost to the economy if things don't really, play out the way we expect them to. So there are fundamental issues here that we have an objection to. And I think, you will recognize that we are right in saying that, you still have a multi-tiered tax structure. Now, GST is not meant to be that way. I can understand some people arguing that because we have a very wide, basket of consumption goods across the country, that's inevitable. But it was the duty of the government to try and minimize those slabs. I mean, at some point, that will have to happen. But, I think the government has compromised. It has got a software on which there are going to be crores of transactions that isn't even tested for its integrity. I think, to my mind, that is
I'll come to...
Because tomorrow, if the system breaks down, God forbid, just tell me what kind of a calamity we can have.
Sanjay Jha, that's a point well noted, and I'll talk about GST preparedness, and I'll be relying on one software, and is this reliance safe enough in just a bit. But Nalin Kohli, I have two questions for you. One is on the anti-profiteering clause, and I'm glad we're talking about the specifics of the GST and not meandering over the semantics, so to say. The anti-profit clause is a clause that your government has put in to check inflation, to see that benefits of the GST are passed on. The counter-argument to that is that market economics, market dynamics, competition will take care of prices. Why have an interventionist bureaucracy? Why leave any room for tax harassment? So the first question is on anti-profiteering, and the second is that the multifarious taxes and the compromises that have been reached leave a lot of room for interpretation, and that's never good for a tax policy.
I will come to your question, but I'll answer it later, because I'd like to first respond to the interventions that were made specifically against my party, and by Sanjay Jha on two occasions. The first point I'd like to say is, this is not, Jay Panda has said it correctly, there's been 20 years in the making. If I only look at the preparedness now, 27,000 man-hours, 200 meetings, and 18 by the GST Council. That's not, and these are people who come with preparation. They are state finance ministers, they are representatives of the state senior officials, working to resolve the problems to bring one tax, one nation. It's not an easy task. So to say that there's no preparedness, I would discount that. I don't think we should run down something which has taken so much effort. The second part, in terms of the states and their revenue, one example, which is that in terms of states being worried, royalty on natural resources and in oil in particular impacted two states, Gujarat and Assam. Both under the UPA ran into trouble because of a price which couldn't have been done in terms of introducing against the royalty interests of the state. Gujarat first, later Assam. Both have finally been solved by the Supreme Court. Now, these were legitimate dues to states, one ruled by the BJP, one ruled by the Congress at that time. Under the UPA, that suffered revenue. So therefore, when it came to royalty, when it came to petroleum and alcohol, three major points, which is natural resources, states were obviously cagey and they've been kept out. Which brings you to the next question, why not one rate? So would you like to tax food grains and other things for the poor? Everyone on the panel will keep on saying poor, 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 poor. So what do you want to do? Introduce them into the tax net and make them suffer? So therefore you have slabs. Obviously the slabs have to over a period of time come together and become either one or maybe lesser slabs. But that is what the GST Council, which is a panel which is essentially representatives of the states with a major weightage to the states, they will find the solutions to. Now let's come to the questions on the integrity of the structure. We keep speaking about the Indian IT industry going abroad and setting up the best systems all over the world. But we have biggest questions on them when they perform in their own country. Let the system work. Obviously the government will be responsible. Obviously we will be answerable if things don't go well. But at the same time, why even run it down before it's come? Because it has been tested and it is bound to have taken that crores of this. Now let's come to GST itself. You are talking of tax terrorism, which is part of your question. The more you remove the human interface, And the more you make it transactional through a system, the less are the chances of terrorism. So the question comes, why about harassment? This country had less than 4 crore income taxpayers. As Prime Minister Modi after demonetization pointed out, 24 lakh people had an income, gave a return of more than 10 lakhs. Probably those who filed it over a crore is less than a lakh. Between the period then and now, 90 lakh, that's 9 million new people added. Basically, not paying taxes and not wanting to be in the system is the norm. So either everybody is very honest and you don't require a government and you don't require the agencies to do all that things, or these things have to be there till people will learn that being honest is the norm. So you can't have it both ways, which is the anti-profiting part of it. The anti-profiting, as Mr. Jaitley is on record to say, we hope we don't have to use it. That's exactly how it is meant to be. But if someone decides to profit at the cost of not passing it down to the consumer, who should be the ultimate beneficiary along with the producers and others, then obviously these laws will step in, and they must step in. Why shouldn't they? So I think, if you look at a totality, I'm again coming to, and my last point is a political point, which is last political point. Why is the Congress calling it a tamasha? Why are they boycotting it? I've been running my head through the day. Right. I couldn't find a single logical reason. Now it's just a question. Perhaps Mr. Rahul Gandhi has tweeted it as a tamasha, and maybe because he's out of the country, which he's entitled to if he wants to travel out, maybe that is the reason they felt that he's not in parliament, let's stop it. Because there's no logical reason for them not to be part of something that they themselves have contributed to success in such a big way.
Yeah, they've themselves called themselves original architects of the GST. But I'm going to get in Yogendra Yadav very quickly. And Mr. Yadav, the whole idea of a GST-like tax is to shift Indian economy from an informal, unorganized to a formal, organized one. But that, of course, will come with its cost, which explains why traders perhaps are protesting in various parts of the country. Markets all across India seem to be shut, the clothes market at least. Is this transition going to be painful? And is that what politicians are not talking about?
At the moment, it doesn't seem that the government itself is prepared. Their own software don't seem to have been tried out properly, and I wouldn't be surprised if 2 or 3 days down the line we find a similar situation as we encountered in the case of demonetization. The sizes don't match, this particular software glitch, and this thing was not prepared. Mind you, this is one of the mega transformations of Indian economy, and something like this required a longer gestation period, required a long trial period, if you wish, and I'm afraid that was not given. Now, the opposition of the small traders could be of two kinds. There could be small traders who are not used to being taxed, who don't like being taxed, and who in this world like being taxed. So there could be an element of that. At the same time, there are very small traders, there are very small operators in the market who are clearly being disadvantaged. Yes, they have an option of opting out of GST, but the cost of opting out is just too high for them to bear. So I really think the economy needed to be prepared much better. I personally think the government needed to be prepared much more than it has been the case.
Okay, Sanjay Jha, this transition from an unorganized sector to organized sector, this has to be seen in the context of demonetization. We've been critical of some of the, some of the fallout or the implications of demonetization as well. But the fact of the matter is that both these steps will help transition the economy from the unorganized sector to an organized sector. That will be a massive leg up for growth, and you cannot dispute that in any manner.
That has already been established to be wrong. I'll give you an example. I mean, Mr. Modi, as usual, made a very dramatic, prime time announcement on demonetization, talking about, the mammoth change that will happen 3 hours later at the midnight clock going ding-dong till 12. What's the reality? Today, after so many months have gone by, 8 months, we don't know how much of black money was recovered. We have no idea whether RBI has even finished the counting of the returned money. Where is the transparency? I mean, this was the Prime Minister telling the people of India, give me 50 days and I will prove to you in the nukkads where I'm willing to stand and take all the criticism and flack that you're capable of giving me. And look at the truth, that's a reality. The BJP, took on that GDP figure that came for Q3, and it actually believes it won the elections in Uttar Pradesh because of that. Forget it, they lost 3 other state elections as well. But this is not about electoral votes. I think the people of India are now asking the question, where is the black money? The last GDP figures told you that the GDP actually went back by almost 800 basis points. And these are manifestations of what I call as fictitious promises. I mean, everybody knows that demonetization was never an economic policy. It was more to give Mr. Modi the image of being an anti-corruption crusader, because people were asking him, "Mere 15 lakh kahan gaye Modi ji, jo aapne mujhe wada kiya tha?" So end of day, let's accept the reality that yes, I'm not even going to deny it, that some economic policies may have some element of a political spin on it. But the truth is, when you're talking about GST, which is a structural reform, there is no need for the BJP. There was no need for the BJP at all. Right. And I disagree with Nalin Kohli on this, when he tries to make it appear as if we are trying to be churlish. Not at all. I mean, why would the Congress party that says, and I'm saying it today, the original architect of the bill, why are we not going to be sitting there and getting the cameras on our face? We don't believe that the occasion needs to be treated in the manner in which the BJP is doing. I think, you know, political culture has changed ever since the BJP has come. Right. I think at some level, we are of the opinion that in a country with several Herculean problems, the political system needs to be more conservative as opposed to indulging in self-promotional razzmatazz.
All right. I'm going to get closing comments from all my panelists. Jay Panda, I'm going to come to you first. Is it, what do you make of this? Is it just political optics at play now with the rollout of GST? You raised some substantive issues on why this is not a perfect GST, but it seems like, you know, political optics at play. A compromise was reached, and so we're going with an imperfect GST.
Well, to be fair, the point I raised was that no law can be really perfect, and neither is this GST, but it is very, very substantially good, and it deserves the full support of everybody. Now, we also participated in the process. We got some changes through. We didn't get some changes through. That is the process of a democracy, of compromises between competing views among political parties. Now, regarding this midnight session, yes, as I said, it is symbolism, and I think this symbolism is worth it, simply because it is the single biggest tax and fiscal reform we have seen in 70 years, and I think it is going to have the same kind of effect on our economy as at least the 1991 reforms did, if not from earlier than that. So yes, it is symbolism, but I don't think there is anything wrong in this kind of symbolism. I think it should be celebrated.
All right, an event like that needs to be celebrated. I'm going to put that argument to rest, but I will quickly take our last question with Nalin Kohli. And Nalin, the question really has to do with who gets the credit for this. I'm not going to get into the Congress versus the BJP. Will you agree with me that while you ran the last lap in breast finishing tape, there was a substantial body of work that was done by your predecessors? So I'm going to ask you two questions. Who runs the last lap, and as a member of the BJP, has the party risked too much by perhaps upsetting your core constituency, which is the Indian trader?
Earlier, I'd read out parts of the Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji's speech in the Lok Sabha, thanking everyone and saying this is not a party thing, which Jay Panda correctly, as the only member of parliament from the Lok Sabha, pointed out that he was fulsome and he was present there when that speech was there. This is not a BJP thing. We are in government today. Government is a continuous institution. Today we are there, tomorrow we may not be there. The Congress was there for 55 years. They are not there today. So I think in that continuum, it's a victory of the government, which is elected by the people of India, and it has been made possible by the representatives of the people of India across the states and in Parliament, who have made it possible through the GST Council. The government politically did what it had to build that consensus, and full marks have to go to the government because it was stalled. Now, to blame the BJP is not correct, because I've given cogent reasons. Yes, there were reasons. Those contentious issues have been kept out. That's how consensus happened. The second part to it is that where does this head politically? Have we risked too much? So is the BJP now to stop working just because it's worried about the next election that comes? Every year we face 3 or 4. If I count the local elections and the panchayat elections and urban bodies, you have probably half a dozen. Everyone's in election mode. As Jay Panda is probably campaigning every few days for something or the other somewhere in his state. So that's how it is. You have to do your bit for the country. You leave it to the people. Which brings me to the political point that the Congress party and others are constantly saying the country is in a mess. People have lost jobs. They are depressed. Demonetization has been a mess. But they elect BJP governments in a vast number of elections, UP being the last. So, I mean, by that standard, it just doesn't make even political sense to me remotely that people are losing jobs, they are in distress, demonetization is a failure, and the BJP is winning elections, at least the vast majority of them. It doesn't count up. So, I think the Congress here is making a monumental error. They should be part of what they have also been an important part of. They should be celebrating with everybody. They need not find this odd thing to take a position that no logical Indian can understand why they've taken this position. Sure. Even though they have taken it, we thank them for their support. The Prime Minister did there. All of us are happy that every political party has contributed to it. And now we will work to ensure GST becomes a success. The states will do their things. We'll do it ours at the center.
Right. I know Sanjay Jha wants to come in, but before you do that, 30 seconds is all you have. You've got to wrap this debate. But Sanjay Jha, very quickly, you know, this morning, Rakesh Jhunjhunwala spoke to ET Now, and he said his big regret is it took 15 years for this country to pass GST. That was his big regret. And is there, in a sense, is there remorse that the Congress couldn't do it despite being in power for 10 years? You could blame the BJP, but the fact is that the BJP has had the political acumen to push it through to get that consensus needed, which the Congress couldn't. Is that something that the Congress regrets today?
No, not at all. Please remember, when people compare the UPA and the NDA, they forget one singular difference. The Congress party had 206 members. We worked with very, very divergent coalition parties, although they had a similar ideological platform. The BJP has an absolute majority. And remember this, that our job was not just to get the opposition parties on board, but also work with our own coalition partners who came from different states and had their own political priorities. I think the fact is that had the BJP not played the parliamentary gridlock and the obstructionist politics, the Congress party would have passed the GST during UPA 2 itself, and the country would have substantially gained. But the second point is equally critical, that, you know, end of day, let's recognize this. This is not about the Congress party or any of the opposition party creating an error by not being part of what I call is nothing but a spectacle and a show. I think end of day, the truth is that India needs reforms. The Congress party has been in government for the majority number of years. We have seen the country go through several transitions. And today we recommended to the government that display a certain degree of sobriety, of, you know, political culture that is a little more inclusive and in a great number of ways symptomatic of the state of India. I think we were doing our job as you know, shall we say, candidly as possible. The BJP has got a different viewpoint. They have always, as you know, appropriated Congress schemes and then tried to market it. The famous example being Manrega, where Mr. Modi mocked it in Parliament and said Manrega is a manifestation of Congress's and UPA's disaster. And today on Manrega, the government of Mr. Modi says we are trying to make a difference to the rural environment. Now that is political hypocrisy, but I think we'll live to fight it another day. Since the BJP keeps talking about election victories, let me tell them, political arrogance is never a good thing. And the public of India can be momentarily influenced by propaganda, but in the long run, they are intelligent enough to make the right choices.
All right. On that note, thank you very much, Nalin Kohli, Sanjay Jha, Jay Panda, Atul Anjan and Yogendra Yadav for being with us. I know Jay Panda has that ceremony to attend, while the rest of you will not. But thank